Pucks with Haggs is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I think this is the 134th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, so thank you for tuning in. Welcome on in. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Go and get yourself a premium subscription, and you can get all of my NHL and Bruins writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write 3 columns a week, usually after Bruins games, at bostonsportsjournal.com. So make sure you check out bostonsportsjournal.com for not only the Bruins coverage, but for every sport. They do a really good job. Today, longtime friend and colleague Jimmy Murphy is here with us. James. And Jimmy Murphy is blowing up as we speak. I love it. Murph, tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
So I'm writing over a site called, I just started writing here this season called rg.org. I got a story on Don Waddell over there right now, so you can go there. And then, of course, you can hear me on the eye test on the Sick Podcast Network with Pierre Maguire.
Yeah, make sure you check out Murph's writing, and the podcast with Pierre is excellent. They have very good guests on, so make sure you check out that as well. Before we get into our subjects for today, and we're going to talk a lot about the first 2 games of the road trip. We're recording this before the Nashville game on Tuesday night. We're going to definitely talk about the viral moment on the Bruins bench between Jim Montgomery and Brad Marchand. We're going to talk just about, you know, the first handful of games where the Bruins are basically treading water at this point, and where they're at right now. So we're going to cover all those topics. And we're going to answer some fan questions as well. But before we get into that, let's thank our sponsors, Prize Picks. Always going to talk about our friends at Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Also, take the guesswork out of buying any kind of tickets with our friends at Game Time. We love Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. With the NBA and the Celtics, the reigning champion Boston Celtics starting up, Game Time is a great place to go to try to get Celtics tickets. So download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. That's right. All right, Murph. Just your take overall as to where we're at with the Boston Bruins right now. 3-3, some good, some bad. Obviously, not good enough in the 2 games against the Florida Panthers, and it's really tough for the Bruins to have to play them twice out of the chute in the first few weeks. But I we've seen some good moments. Obviously 3-3 is not horrendous, but also I think we see some trends or some things happening right now that we can start to formulate opinions on.
Yeah, look, I kind of look at it like this, and Jim Montgomery, I forget what the question was, but he was kind of referenced to this the other night after the game, is you look at last season or even the last 2 seasons, right? And you had, obviously, 2 seasons ago, Bergeron and Krejci there, much different team. They revolved around that. That was their engine. And Montgomery almost just had to come in and kind of fill out the lines. And I'm not saying he didn't do anything or he didn't deserve the Jack Adams, but even he admitted, having Bergeron there was like having a Reg Dunlop, a player coach. So I think he kind of had that there. And that culture kind of trickled a little into last year. And I think now, this year, where we're at right now, Joe, I think is where a lot of people thought they'd be at this point in last season, where things are starting to come back to reality for the Boston Bruins, not just on the ice, but as an organization. And I think that they're a contending team. I still do, but I also think that they have a lot of work. They're not in that elite group anymore. They're not in that Stanley Cup contender group anymore. And I think there's a lot of work to be done. I think the lineup has some holes where, look, I look at Zadorov. I was just before I came on with you, I was looking at Zadorov's stats, and a lot of people told me I loved the signing, but then after I was public about that, I had some scouts, some NHL execs come to me and say, you guys are maybe overrating this guy a bit. There's a reason he's been on 4 teams in 3 years, and a lot of that is that he's always being played too high in the lineup. He should be, in the opinion of all these guys I spoke to, should be a third pairing guy. And the bigger picture of that to me is that I think we have a lot of guys like that on the Boston Bruins right now that maybe aren't in the right place in the lineup or don't know their place in the lineup. And I think they're still trying to figure that out. So I know it hasn't been pretty, but I'm not as doom and gloom as a lot of people. I think they need a little more time to figure out where everyone fits right now.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely for sure. And some of those players, I think, frankly, are going to need time to like create an identity with the Bruins too. Like a lot of the new guys have actually been some of their best players. And I was going to get to this. Cole Koepke leads the NHL with a +10. He's been outstanding for them. He is a big time credit to the Bruins NHL scouting staff, the pro scouting staff, who continue to find these guys in other organizations that can come to the Bruins and are legit NHL players and guys that they can use. And they come on, small contracts, and they're really happy to come to the Bruins because they actually get an opportunity where he didn't get it really in Tampa and didn't seize it when he did get it. But, same with Parker Weatherspoon, same kind of guy with the Islanders, languishing there and not getting a shot. And he comes here and he becomes an NHL player. So Elias Lindholm, I think, has been pretty decent for the most part. I've liked his game, and I really like some of the things that he brings to the table. I'll be honest with you, Murph. Zadorov, to me, is like the least of the Bruins' back end issues. I actually think he's been good. He's taken too many penalties. He's taken too many penalties, but I think that's really the only area I look at and say, like, he's really problematic there. Like, the Bruins back end has much bigger problems than Nikita Zadorov. Brandon Carlo's been terrible to start the season. Really bad start for him. Charlie McAvoy, I think, has been extremely undisciplined, had some really, really bad plays, and is kind of all over the place. And I don't know if he thought signing Zadorov was going to allow him to rove and be a rover and just fly around all over the place. But that's what he's doing. And I think that part of the Zadorov signing has had a negative impact as far as how McAvoy is acting, but that's not on Zadorov. Like, I think Zadorov actually has not been bad. But I do think asking him to play, to your point, 24 minutes a night is probably asking too much. He's going to be in like the 18 20 minutes.
Yeah, but this McAvoy point you're making, Joe, is brilliant. And I think that's the biggest example. And, maybe I phrase it wrong, but I agree with you. It's the effect that maybe these new players are having on the other players, where maybe they thought they were afforded more luxuries. That's a great point by you on McAvoy being a roamer, because I think that's exactly what he was thinking when he said, "Oh, this guy's coming on. I don't have to worry about it. I can pinch. He's going to drop that." But the problem is sometimes Zadorov pinches too. It's just his tendency. I don't think they're a good pairing. I think they're going to have to, sooner rather than later, start to mix that up a little more in the back end.
Yeah, two things I would say about Zadorov that I've seen, and I think he's actually been really solid, but the two things I would say is he takes a lot of penalties, and sometimes it's him just being stronger than everybody else, and it's not really his fault.
Yeah, there's been a couple.
And I think a few of those have been in that category. The other thing, to your point, is I see him higher up in the ice than I would expect for a guy that's more of like a stay-at-home defensive defenseman. And he's making plays higher up the ice, more towards like the defensive blue line, sometimes in the neutral zone. But there's definitely been a handful of times I'm like, wow, Zadorov's that high up. He's not that closer to the net right now. And that's like surprised me a little bit, just seeing more of his tendencies, like when you're watching him all the time. So definitely that's something where I don't think, if he's playing with McAvoy, I don't think McAvoy can just assume that Zadorov is going to be like stapled to the front of his own net and going to be there all the time. So I think McAvoy should continue to play exactly the way he's always played. But like there's been undisciplined stuff with McAvoy taking penalties too. Like I don't like McAvoy's game the first few weeks of the season. No. That cross-checking penalty that he took after he knocked down, I forget which game it was, but it was one of the games at home where he knocked somebody down, and then he started. And he started cross-checking him when he was down. It was Verhaeghe, I think. Yeah. He started cross-checking him when he was down on the ice, and it did it like 5 or 6 times. And then finally the ref's like, I need to call this. Like, this is an obvious penalty.
What am I supposed to do here?
Yeah. And then the Bruins give up a power play goal like almost immediately after McAvoy's in the box. Like that was just like a sign of a bunch. And Montgomery talked about it after the game, how frustrated he was at some of the penalties they took, and that was definitely one of them. Yeah. So like, there's that part of it. I don't think Mason Lohrei's been very good either, which is surprising to me. He seemed to be poised to take a big step this year, and I think he's really struggled out of the gate to start this year. Definitely some defensive issues, like with the puck. Sometimes he's like made some turnovers and done some things that he wasn't doing as much last year. Mm-hmm. that I also think is interesting. And maybe they're like pressuring him more. Maybe they've adjusted after watching him for a little bit. But I think back end, like there are very few. I actually haven't hated Hampus Lindholm. I think he's been decent. He's been pretty good for the most part. And Zadorov has been okay. But outside of them, and Peak, I guess, has been okay for the most part, even though I want to say it was like the first game against Florida, but none of them were good against the first game against Florida. But outside of those two, I think everybody else has been just okay. If not worse than okay, and it has things to fix. But like for me, the bigger issue has been the forward group. And that's where I think they still have, Morgan Geekie is not going to be a permanent fit on the top six. And I think we saw that in the first few games. Trent Frederick off to a really bad start. Charlie Coyle off to a really slow start. Pasternak's got some goals, but I don't think he's played well at all. And to me, he looks like he's coasting through a lot of these games. Like he looked like a complete passenger in that last game against Utah. Just not a good game at all. And he takes a really bad tripping penalty in overtime that, you can argue it wasn't a trip, but Pasternak had a stick in the guy's skates and he tripped over them. And he was doing that nowhere near his own net. It was in the offensive zone. It was nowhere near like a game-saving play or anything like that. It was just a dumb, lazy thing to do. Yep. And he immediately got called for a penalty, and it ends up turning the game
not
on.
Being involved. He's not all there right now, and
Marchand looks like he's still playing catch up a little bit to where he's going to be post surgery. Max Jones and Riley Tufte have not found any kind of identity whatsoever with this team yet. Riley Tufte, I really don't think is an NHL player after watching him a little bit in training camp, and now I just don't see it. Like I see a 6'6" guy that definitely is slow. And doesn't even like win enough board battles for a guy that huge. Like he should be dominating that stuff. And I remember a game against Montreal. I don't know who it was, but it was a guy, maybe it was Hudson or somebody. It was somebody like half his size, just completely cleaned him out with the puck and totally won the battle. And I was watching him. I'm like, isn't that guy like 6'5"? Like, what is he doing? That's got to be his bread and butter. So like I think there's a lot of forwards that are struggling right now. And the end of the day, the bottom line, it comes down to some of these guys are off the slow starts. And I think we see, Murph, that this Bruins team is one top six forward short right now, big time. Yeah. Jake DeBrusk left and they did not replace his speed, his game breaking ability, his skill, all that stuff. And I know Don Sweeney is probably going to do it at the trade deadline. He wants to cycle through all these players and give them top six looks and see if anybody can, they can catch lightning in a bottle and, get by with somebody that they have, like a Morgan Geekie or a Justin Brazeau, Brazeau's another one that's off to a slow start. See if one of these guys can seize hold of it. But to me, it looks like they're one goal scorer short right now of really being a dangerous unit. And maybe the offense is going to be a little bit of a struggle, even with the addition of Elias Lindholm as the number one center.
Yeah, and you know what? Going back to Marchand too, and I know we'll get into what happened with him in Montgomery in a second, but it's not just that he's off physically. It seems mentally to me too. Just he's a step behind, thinking the game, getting the rhythm back, and that takes time, and that's understandable. And look, he's kind of been a freak of nature when he's come back from these things before. When he's, I remember, was it 2 seasons ago when he wasn't supposed to play until November, and then he came back right around now, like late October. I remember it was like on a Thursday night or something. He surprised everyone and came back.
Yep.
It's nature, man. I'm not saying that Father Time is completely caught up to him by any means, but it's catching up. I think it is. And I'm just thinking big picture and down the road. And we have to wonder, is he going to have to start to reinvent himself a bit out there? We've seen other players who say, okay, this is what I've done for so long, but now my body's limiting me sometimes from doing that. What can I do now to fit in and still be a great help? And I think he's still got a ton to offer. Yeah. It's just a matter, maybe there might be a period coming up here in the next month or so where he figures out or has to figure out, okay, what's my role in addition to what I've already done and what I can't do anymore. And I'll see. We'll see.
Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and pretty simple. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. I love Prize Picks because I'm going to take some of my observations from other fantasy football and throw them right into Prize Picks. Players that are going off. Kyler Murray had a great start to the season. He's kind of cooled off a little bit now, so I maybe would stay away from Kyler Murray. But that's just an example of the kind of things you can go after in Prize Picks. This week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at the football board and selecting Justin Jefferson for more than 83.5 receiving yards and Patrick Mahomes for less than 267.5 passing yards. Tyreek Hill for more than 97.5 receiving yards and Saquon Barkley for more than 67.5 rushing yards. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select players' projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. What's better than that? It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game.
Whenever I think about players like that, the one that always comes to my mind that adjusted and made a huge adjustment later in his career is your friend and mine, Mark Recchi, Hall of Fame player.
Oh, yeah.
Who definitely didn't have the speed and some of the things he had earlier in his career towards the end, but he would become a guy that was just this undersized force that would be in front of the net, tipping pucks, getting rebounds, screening the goalie, doing all of the smart, veteran things to make sure that the offense was running smoothly and that he was getting those hard-nosed goals that you need to get in order to win. And, he would still produce, doing that. He still was a productive player, even late in his career when he clearly had the Barney Rubble skating steps to try to keep up with everybody else. You could tell he was working really hard to try to keep up when he was a little bit older, but he did. And he also did some really smart things, good team things to help the team. Because the one thing I notice right now with Marchand is that he's trying to do too much by himself.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to skate through 2 or 3 guys. He's trying to hold on to pucks, makes that one play, and we're going to get into it now. But that one play where you saw Montgomery barking at him on the bench was a offensive blue line turnover where he tried to skate through 2 or 3 guys.
Never do before.
Lost the puck, and it ends up going the other way, and it turns into a goal that ended up getting overturned because it was offside. But I think we've seen too much, and Marchand has always been a player that gets in modes like that, where he gets into tunnel vision, not passing, hanging on to pucks, trying to do it all himself, one-on-one hockey. Which I don't think is good for him. And I think, he's going to have to make that adjustment to simplify, pass the puck, do the little things to kind of get out of it. And to your point, he may have to adjust his game a little bit too, as a 36-year-old guy that's definitely going to be slowing down.
Yeah, look, by no means, all right? So Bruins fans, please don't come at me here. I'm not putting them on the same level. Brad Marchand is a future Hall of Famer. Brendan Gallagher is not. But Brendan Gallagher and Brad Marchand have long played similar styles. And you saw the last few years where Gallagher's game really regressed, and he was hearing it from the Montreal media and the fans, and he was doing exactly what we're seeing Marchand do right now. And if you watch the Canadians now, he's been one of their better players because I think either somebody got to him in the offseason or he got to himself and he said, okay, I'm not that guy anymore. I can't get away with that now. I need to tighten up my game a bit, and I need to think the game more and understand that my skills, my body aren't always going to be able to catch up to what I want to do. And I'm going to have to kind of change that direction here. So I just see a little similarity there. And again, not putting them on the same level as players in terms of Hall of Fame status, but it's just another example, a current example of players adapting. So we'll see what happens with that. But, you talked about some of these other forwards, and I credit you definitely. The Boston Bruins pro scouting staff overall has done a good job. But some of these guys right now, I think, the bottom 6 guys that are being asked to maybe do a little more as the top 6 struggles, they seem a little bit out of their element. And I think you're right. I almost feel like, Joe, that there's the top 3 forwards and the bottom 3 forwards. I think they'll figure it out. I think eventually that evens off. I think the fourth line has already done it. I mean, they've been their best line.
Yep.
But that in-between group is something that, I think Don Sweeney and his staff right now are probably really evaluating because I think there's still a lot of question marks there. And that's where he's going to have to go out on the trade market and get that. And you said, maybe at the trade deadline he'll do that. I think maybe it comes earlier, Joe, because I look at it right now. The one good thing for the Bruins right now with where they are, you started this off saying they're treading water, is a lot of teams that were expected to do better are treading water too right now. Some are even completely underwater, like the team they're going to play in Nashville on Tuesday night, who hasn't won a game yet and was expected to be a cup contender. So there's a lot of teams in the same position as the Bruins. So it's going to be the team that figures out exactly what they need first and goes out and gets it that's going to get that lead step.
Well, the one other thing, though, to consider, Murph, is that early guy that they're going to add, is that going to be Tyler Johnson instead of a trade, which I think it very well could be. And
he
maybe
wouldn't be here if it wasn't going to be.
Right.
That's a good
point. And he very well could give them a shot in the arm. The only reason I don't see them making a trade early is because they don't have the salary cap space.
Yeah,
like they'd have
to be cap for cap.
Yes, they would have to seriously reconfigure their roster to do that, which makes it a little more complicated. Maybe they do, but I think their plan all along has been to bank cap space as the guys go on IR and have enough money at the trade deadline to get somebody, because they're going to have to do that after paying Swayman a little bit more than I think they had originally anticipated. I'm really loath to break up the fourth line because Beecher, Kostelic, and Koepke have been phenomenal. They've been so good together. Like, I don't see how you want to mess with that or should mess with that. But Koepke, to me, has shown enough that I wonder if he ends up getting time with Marchand and Coyle as a right wing. And you can see what kind of a fit he could be there as a speedy guy that plays tenacious. Certainly he's shown he can finish. He's a little bit older, so is he a little bit more experienced after, getting a lot of seasoning with Tampa's AHL team. I wonder if at some point he gets some looks too, in addition to some of these other guys like Brazeau, Max Jones, Geeky, maybe Tufte gets a look there. I don't know. But like Tufte has not shown me anything. I hate to bag on the guy, but I just have not seen anything to make me think that he shouldn't be anywhere but in Providence at this point. But like Koepke's a guy, that I think has been outstanding and has been outstanding in preseason and now, and like just from the very get-go, he was like out of a cannon his first preseason game at the Garden, scored a goal. And I think ever since then, he's continued to just be really, really good, and shows that he's an NHL player and he deserves maybe some shots to play in that top six with guys like Marchand and Coyle.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I completely agree. But I want to go back, though, Joe, to the Marchand Montgomery thing, because
hold on, Murph, before we get in that, let me get into one thing, because we got a couple of tweets here.
Go for it.
One from Goosey 1994. Good. And these are reactions to Monty chastising and F-bombing Marchand on the bench and giving him like a little nudge when he was turned the other way and not looking at him. Good. Accountability needs to be held, veterans included. They can take it. That's why he's the captain. Basically saying Marchand can take that kind of a conversation because he's the captain. I agree too. And this is the other side. VM D'Souza 9 on Twitter. I don't like Marchand, but he deserves better from the coach. He's done more for the Bruins than Montgomery ever will. And, those are two very different viewpoints on the interaction. Murph, I'll let you go first. I'm really curious as to what you think of this whole thing.
Well, I'm going to sound like the boomer yelling at the clouds here, but people need to toughen up a bit. If you've got an issue with that, then maybe you're following the wrong sport, or you're in the wrong sport here. This is hockey.
Yeah.
All right. And it's still a big boy sport. It's still a tough sport. And these guys that are in it, they've got thick skin. The first tweet you read there, he's absolutely right. Marchand can handle this. And it's not an insult when a coach does that. He didn't come out in the media and insult him or anything. He did that right on the bench. And, one thing I've noticed about Montgomery is he does go to, from what I hear, I mean, I'm not behind the scenes, but from what players have told me, and you know it too, Joe, he goes to the players first before he says anything harsh to us. Obviously, that was an issue with the previous coach. And I just think this is normal. This happens. And you know what? When a team's kind of meandering and can't find their rhythm and can't get going, and as Joe said, treading water, you need that type of emotion on the bench. I want to see that. And to be frank, I've been wanting to see it a lot more from Montgomery since he's been here. But as I said before, when we started off, he was in a position where he didn't really have to coach as much. Now he does. Now he knows it's on him to motivate these guys. And sometimes that's going to be getting in your face. Sometimes that's going to be giving a little nudge. And, I hear Elliot Friedman and Kyle Bukauskas on their 32 Thoughts podcast saying, well, that could be something that really needs to be investigated internally. And this could be an issue because he gave him a little nudge. Come on. Seriously, sack up. Enough. I mean, this is hockey. Like, and that happens all the time. How many times have you seen players give each other nudges on the ice? Like, come on, man, let's get going. I have no issues with it. No issue with it whatsoever.
No, like a youth hockey, like an adult coach doing that to a kid, huge problem with it. Like high school, even like huge problem. Like you're not going to do that. Like that should not happen. Two grown men on a bench in a professional sports
being paid millions of dollars.
Setting, no, I don't see that as an issue. I don't see that as anything needs to be investigated, anything where Montgomery even needs to be chastised for that. No. Like, he wanted to make sure that Marchand was not looking at him. Marchand was staring straight ahead, and Montgomery wanted Marchand to know, I'm talking about you. And he wanted it to be clear that who he was talking about and who he was addressing that and gearing that towards. And it was just barely a nudge. Like, that is not anything that anybody should have a huge issue with. And that's extremely soft if you think that needs to be investigated, looked at, like any kind of problem whatsoever. Like, I honestly hadn't heard the podcast. I hadn't heard Elliot Friedman and Kyle talking about it. And so I don't know the context of what they actually said, but I just don't see that as anything that's any kind of a blip on the register in any radar in any way, shape, or form. What I will say though, right, is the one problematic thing for me in all of this, because I don't have an issue with him, like what he got mad about too. I think it was a bad play for Marchand at the offensive blue line, giving up the puck there. I think it's exactly what he's done too much in the early going. And once, as a coach, as somebody that coaches hockey, I can tell you the one thing that pisses you off most as a coach, well, like the dirty stuff, like, kids trying to hurt other kids, like hits from behind, like all that crap, headshots, like that's one level. But the other thing, what pisses you off about your players the most is when you see them making the same mistakes over and over again and doing things that you just talked about before the game started, and then they start doing it during the game. And like, that is the stuff I think that gets you really aggravated and can get your dander up and can get you, angry like that. And so, like, I'm sure this has been a conversation and they've gone over this in video before. And that's where some of that, that anger and that froth is coming from. But the other thing that is a big part of this equation, a big factor here, is Montgomery's contract, his job situation, all of this stuff. And is he starting to do things now that are a little out of character because he's feeling the pressure and the stress of the situation? And are we starting to see cracks within Montgomery of the way that he's acting and reacting? So the players pick up on that. That's a problem. If Montgomery's starting to act any different than he normally does, and I'd never seen him blow up like that on the bench before, like maybe behind closed doors, but I've never seen that on the bench. If he starts doing things that are out of character for him or different than he had done the last couple of years, and to your point, maybe he has to at times because it's a different group. But I thought they did some things last year that were like sort of, task mastery,
building towards this,
a little more hard nosed, But if he starts showing the pressure and he starts doing things where it's clear that all of his job situation is on his mind or is like definitely in there and it's a factor as to what's going on, like, I think that's when you honestly, especially if they're struggling, I think that's when you as management have to start thinking about, like, do we have to, make a move here? Do we have to do something about this? So if we don't want to extend the coach, are we putting him in a position where, like, this is going to get worse because he's clearly stressed out about it? Like, that is part of the equation that I would look at and say, like, how much of a factor is that? How much of a problem is the ongoing issue with Monty not having a new contract and him being in a lame duck situation? Because that is never easy for an NHL coach. When any NHL coach is in that position, especially with high expectations, you're talking about a road that usually doesn't end well for the coach. It usually ends with them being fired and replaced at some point during the season.
I completely agree with everything you said there, and I'm glad you went there, Joe. And another factor I'll put in that's out there right now, and I don't think Montgomery is the only coach that may be thinking about this, because there's other coaches in a similar position probably wondering what's going on with their job, is Joel Quenneville is now on the market. And I know for a fact that teams are interested already. And, that first domino to drop might lead to him being hired. And the fact that a 3-time Stanley Cup champion is available right now could be enticing to teams that are uncertain about their coaching situation going forward, or even in the present. So there's a lot of things going on. I'm glad you brought that up. And I want to just go further and blame management, because I think he did deserve an extension before this season started. I think he had done enough to do that. And I know he had only been past the first round of the playoffs. But again, considering the losses he experienced, I don't think he's done bad at all. I think he's been a solid coach here. And I think he deserved at least a 2 to 3 year extension. And we've seen coaches get fired 1 year into an extension. So you never know. I mean, an extension doesn't mean you're locked in. But maybe with Jeremy Jacobs it does, because he doesn't want to be paying a guy to sit home.
Right.
But still, I think that they have created this sort of monster right now that's percolating. So it's something to keep an eye on. I think you're right. If he does this more often and he's sort of out of character, then we know that stress is weighing on him. And the player, you made a great point there. The players can sense that too, because I'm like, this isn't you, man. You're just doing this because you're worried about your job. And once they start thinking that way, it's not good.
No, it's not. You know what team Boston sports fans are most excited about this time of year right now? It's not the Patriots, definitely not the Red Sox. I mean, there's plenty of Bruins fans that are very excited about the Boston Bruins, but I've got to tell you, I think the team that everybody's most excited about is the Boston Celtics. They're excited about NBA hoops coming back. They're excited to go to the Garden and watch the Celtics play, defending that world championship and watching Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and all of those guys that they've loaded up on their roster. And you know where the best place to get Celtics tickets is, to get tickets to the Garden, to see basketball games? It's our friends at Game Time. Yes, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets by using the app, by getting your tickets through the app. It's the most exciting time of year for a basketball fan. Just look at all the features on the Game Time app. I love the all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Who detests, I raise my hand, surprise fees at the checkout? Game Time is not about that. They are about showing you upfront what the cost of the tickets are. I am all about that. You can get seat views, get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy the tickets. Lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. If you're looking for Celtics tickets, Game Time is the place to go. You got to take the guesswork out of buying tickets for the Celtics. And oh, by the way, you can get Patriots tickets, you can get Bruins tickets, you can get concert tickets, comedy tickets, whatever you want. But we're talking the Celtics right now. You can use all of those things at Game Time. So create the Game Time app, go to the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, download the Game Time app. It's super easy to use. Create an account and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today for all of your Celtics and NBA tickets, folks. What time is it? It's Game Time.
You know, you and I thinking that Montgomery deserves an extension, though, is not the same as the Bruins management thinking he deserves an extension. Clearly, they did not think he deserved an extension, and they want to see how things play out this year, and they haven't seen enough in the playoffs. And I think that, Murph, you're bang on with that. I think that is the number one reason why they did not sign him to an extension, because they're left wanting as far as the postseason goes with, you know, how he's done against other coaches in some of these series, getting them up for like home games, which they have not been able to do in the playoffs the last few years, which has been terribly, like really surprising. And, you know, like the too many men on the ice penalties, like some of the chaos that was on the bench during the postseason as well. I think there's a lot of things there going on where they felt like maybe they could do better, or certainly they didn't want to lock themselves into a contract where, to your point, they'd have to fire him like a year in and then be paying him for a couple of years. Big money. Coaches make good money these days. You know, I'm sure it would be a few $1 million that he would end up getting if he got an extension. So they're hesitant about that. And like, does it put him in a really tough spot? Absolutely. But like, I also think, and I've mentioned this a few times, like they set up this season very similarly to the way they set up the last season with Claude Julien, where Bruce Cassidy was on that staff after he had been in Providence. And you've got three guys, in my opinion, on that Bruins staff that could be head coaches of the Boston Bruins: Chris Kelly, Joe Sacco, and Jay Leach. I think any of those three guys could be internal candidates. And I don't think they would go for Quinville.
Bringing Jay Leach back, too, spoke volumes to me.
Right. I think it did. So, like, I don't think Quinville would be on their radar. I think it would be one of those guys if they made a move and they were bringing an internal guy. And I think that, Jay Leach was considered for the head coaching job when Montgomery was hired. Like, he was in the mix.
Exactly.
So he's even been thought of in that position before. So, that's hard to ignore if you're Jim Montgomery too, that like Don Sweeney, if nothing else, I think is very deliberate, is very predictable, is very methodical with the way he does things, right? I think after you see him, the way he does things, like sometimes he surprises you. Some of the trade deadline stuff will surprise you, like the big moves that they can make.
Okay.
But usually when they're interested in a player, they stay interested. It's not like a surprise guy. Usually it's somebody that they've been on for a while. The way that they handled the end of the Claude Julien era and bringing in Bruce Cassidy, I think spoke to the way they view things as far as coaching changes go and the way they go about it. And my radar went up as soon as Jay Leach was hired as an assistant. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. If they don't extend Jim Montgomery, this might be a problem. This might mean trouble for him. Like, this seems to be a pattern of what they're going to do. They want an answer in place and something in place if they make the move. And they've kind of hedged their bets here if they need to make the move by having these guys on the staff. So, and inevitably, if you're in a situation like Jim Montgomery and you go through a little period of struggle, you're going to feel the stress more than you would if you were in the middle of a 5-year contract. You're going to act a little differently, and it becomes a lot easier for the Bruins to potentially fire you and make a move if it's the right time or if it's a convenient time rather than stick with the coach through the end of the year.
It won't be a Super Bowl parade this year, I'll tell you that.
No, definitely not. Definitely, you won't have to worry about like the Patriots doing it under the cover of the Patriots collecting all the media and all the interest. But like, the bottom line, to get back to what we talked about at first, I have no problem with the incident between Montgomery and Marchand in general. I think it's fine. I think coaches still should be able to, get their message across in that way to their players. I didn't mind the nudge, like punching a player, smacking him off the head, like all that stuff would be a level that you couldn't go to. But like a nudge on the shoulder is not something I would ever see as a problem. Like, I really don't. You can't, like, the problem becomes you can't view professional sports through the same prism you would corporate America, like working in an office, where if a boss did that to an employee, a subordinate, that might be an issue. Certainly it would be with HR, like whatever. Yeah. But you can't view like professional sports in that same prism. Like, you can't treat it the same way as you would working in some like office in corporate America.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. And, you look at right now when we're talking about the different things they've done that maybe set the path for this not to work for Montgomery. It's there. And he has to know that too. So, I mean, it's a tough situation, but look, like I said, it's early yet. I think that, nothing's imminent in terms of changes or big changes, whether it's coaching or trades or anything. I think, they're going to at least wait till Thanksgiving.
Tyler Johnson's the only thing I would say that's imminent is he'll get signed, I would think, in the next few weeks, as soon as they can figure out the salary cap thing. But they probably felt, like, this is my thought, is they probably felt some allegiance to give guys like Riley Tufte and Koepke and Max Jones and some of these other guys that they signed to deals on July 1 to give them a fair shot. Like, they probably promised that to them when they signed him. They want to live up to their word. But I would assume at some point in the next few weeks, you're going to see Tyler Johnson get signed and inserted in there. Like, Danton Heine didn't sign until the end of October, October 30th. We're still not even there yet when Heine signed last year. So I would expect that he's going to be brought in, and that would be the only imminent thing. Like coach getting fired, trades, like any of that stuff, I think is still a long way off.
What do you think the one thing, and like I keep seeing people on, and they're always going to do this on social media, bring up Lysell, bring up Merkulov, I'm still against that. And I know, I get, look, it could bring in some youthful excitement and enthusiasm. I get that, but they've tried it. And every time they try it, it's not working. So I just don't think that bringing up one of those kids right now is the answer.
No, but that's the easy thing to go to. Is like, just bring up one of the kids. They'll give you a spark. Like, Lysell's good offensively. But like, it would be a lot easier to do that. It would be a lot easier to do that if they had been lights out awesome in training camp, in preseason. Like, if one of them had been the last cut was phenomenal. Like, you gave the veteran the benefit of the doubt, but it was like, it was a hard decision to make. No. They sent those guys down early as a message, like, not good enough. You were not good enough here. And Lysell was kind of up and down, I think, that first weekend. He did some good things in Providence, but he wasn't by any means dominant. And Tyler Johnson's a better option than either one of those, as far as a player that's going to help them, as far as a player that can play like all the different forward positions, can play up and down the lineup, can do a lot of different things. You could plug him in at right wing with Coyle and Marchand, and I think he would be a good fit there. Like, I think they're going to look at him first and see what he can provide. And this is part, Murph, like I talked about, of the audition. Like, I think this is going to be a by committee, by audition, like top 6, like the second line right wing spot. I think they're going to cycle through everybody and give them a shot there and see if anybody can actually like play well and hold on to it for a while. That hasn't been the case yet, but I think that's going to continue to be the case. And like, it becomes a really key spot when Coyle is not playing great. Like, I love Charlie Coyle, good guy, great leader, has had an excellent career for the Bruins. Like, to me, he showed last year that he can be a second line center, like that he can be a top 6 center in the NHL, had a fantastic season. But he has not been good to start this year. He's been like passive too much, not looking for his own offense enough, not using his size and strength and speed enough, just not good enough in general. And some of that is probably playing with a Marchand right now, who has been too one-on-one, and they're not playing together as a duo. And because they don't have, like, they had a game-breaking guy playing with them, Jake DeBrusk, who, like, helped them quite a bit too, you know, and to not have him, I think they miss him quite a bit. I think having that element of speed and game-breaking ability and offense was a big deal with those other 2 players. And, like, you really need, if you're going to have Charlie Coyle, who is not really offense first, he's more of a two-way center. He's more of a guy that's going to, like, back check and, you know, do all the right things. To have that and a guy in Marchand that's maybe slowing down a little bit, not quite the dominant offensive force that he was 4 or 5 years ago, you got to have somebody on the right wing that can do more of the heavy lifting and do more of the scoring and be more of an offensive catalyst, you know, and can drive the line at times. Like, I frankly think DeBrusk did that a bit last year.
Look, I don't get the people. Look, maybe early on in his career, he didn't show it as much, but I mean, I think at least for the last 3 years, you know, ever since he kind of got through that whole battle with Cassidy.
I would say the last 2, the last year and the year before, when he was like awesome in the Winter Classic and all that stuff. Like, that was a great year.
Yeah. If he doesn't break his leg in the Winter Classic, man, he's on his way to 30 goals easy. Yeah. You know, like, I mean, he in Boston for some reason, not around the league, because when you talk to fans, scouts around the league, they saw it. But in Boston, everybody knocked his skate and say he didn't skate hard enough. I don't know what they were watching. I really don't. And he skated very hard. And I credit you for pointing out how they miss him right now, because you're right. He would be the perfect elixir for that line right now, because not only just his skating, just him in general, he would bring energy to a line that right now is a bit dormant. And that's what Jake did. When he was on the ice, he was full of energy. He's a big personality, good on the bench. That was a guy that I think, you know, a lot of people maybe didn't realize how much the Bruins are going to miss him, and they never really replaced it.
No, they didn't. And in general, I've seen a lot of criticism saying the Bruins are like too slow now too. And, you know, they definitely brought in some size and slowed down a bit. I wouldn't say they're slow, but I don't think they like improved their speed, put it that way, with the additions that they made. The fourth line, for sure. The fourth line's fast and big and strong and physical. Like, the fourth line, the reason they're effective is because they're all those things. But like, they lost a speed and skill element with DeBrusk that they did not adequately replace in the top 6. All right. This is from Tom Collins. The coach is not the issue at all, and you can't blame the captain, as he's the oldest dude out there and still grinding if you watch his shifts. Biggest issue is the other wingers cannot produce. Jake could do it. We let him go. Pasta is literally Manny Ramirez on skates and can score the puck, but can't grind when needed. That's interesting. Fourth line is killing it, but how would they do against other lines? Those dudes are fun to watch. Can Patra play more? He's young and seems he can score the puck, but that's a lot to put on a young one. But look at what they're doing in Utah. I forgot his name, but he's around the same age and killing it. Clayton Keller, is that who he's talking about? But Clayton Keller's a little older than Patra. No. The team is too slow. We are bigger now on D, which is great, but the forwards are too slow and careless with the puck. Hoping someone can step up besides the fourth liners, and that's from Tom Collins.
Maybe he's talking about Dylan Guenther. I don't know.
What's that, Murph?
Dylan Guenther maybe on Arizona.
Oh yeah, Dylan Guenther.
Yeah, it might be him.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
No, I mean, I think
but Patra's a guy that I think we will continue to see more of, because I think he's actually been one of their better forwards in the start here.
Would you put him up on the wing on the second line?
You know, if I were going to
center, but I might put him at the wing.
If I was going to move him to the second line, I would put him at center on the second line with Marchand,
okay.
and I would probably put Coyle down on the third line center, and I would switch
let them fall into line. Yeah,
and then put somebody else on, and maybe that's a time when you put Koepke on the wing. And if you're going to really like shake it up, you might as well shake it up and put him there too.
That's a small line though. Marchand.
Koepke's not that small.
No, I'm saying Porcher and Marchand though. Yeah, you're gonna have
those two. Yeah. But Koepke's a pretty decent sized guy.
Either way,
or you could put Brazil there or somebody like you know. There's a lot of different combinations you could do. Yeah. But I just don't buy into like this is my thing on Patra. I like him. I think he's been good. I think he answered every question I had as to whether like he'd be better off going in Providence or not in training camp and early in the season. Like he showed he's an NHL player. Like, and he's got top 6 ability, and like he can help this team. There's no question about it. It was hard to read sometimes last year, the way the year went for him and the way it ended for him, whether he was regressing, whether he was like more the guy, like he just played out of his mind early in the year and he's more the guy we saw in the second half. But I think we continue to see improvement from him that tells you that he's going to be a pretty high-end NHL player. But the thing that I wonder about him is, can he stay in one piece? Like physically, can he stay healthy? And I think putting him on the wing puts him in more danger of getting hit, of getting hurt in board battles, of getting worn down physically, like all that stuff. So I would probably not put him there just for those reasons. Like, I just don't think he's built to be a winger. And I think putting him there, you risk him, maybe sustaining more injuries. But like, if you're going to, I do think he should get at some point some top 6 look with Marchand and with some skill to see if like they can make some things happen offensively, especially if Marchand, Coyle, and whoever they put at the right wing continue to struggle offensively. Like, through no fault of Coyle's, I like him. I liked him last year as a second line center. Yeah. He's proven he can do it. But on this team with this personnel, maybe he's better playing on a third line with like Trent Frederick and Brazeau or something like that, and have a big, huge physical puck possession third line with those three, or at least get a look at it. But I do think it's interesting to see where Patra fits in all this. And like the Pasta thing, Murph, like he just hasn't been good to start the year. I have not been like that impressed with him. Like the other night, he had a play where he got the puck in the high slot, right? And it just popped out to him. I'm not sure if it was a pass or the puck popped out to him, but he had the puck in like the prime scoring area. And the casual way that he was handling the puck, and it looked like he was like maybe going to go for that like slingshot thing that he does sometimes with the puck. Yeah. And he ends up just fumbling away the puck and losing it. No scoring chance, no shot on net, no nothing. And like when he doesn't make that play, the way he goes about doing it, it looks so casual and careless. It looks so bad. Like sometimes it results in a goal, but I wonder if like that kind of stuff he's falling in love with too much instead of being an actual like effective hockey player. And it's a tough balance, right? Because he's creative, he's playmaking, he thinks differently. Like that's part of what makes him great. But it also, I think, is a double-edged thing where it turns into turnovers and him not looking good at times. And like, it puts fuel on the fire for people that want to criticize him, put it that way.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't know if it was last season, I think, when he went through a little stretch and Pierre was talking about it, Haggs, and he said, reminds me of what we had to do with Jagger when he was younger. And just like, because you just nailed it there, where he thinks so much different than most of us, right? Or so much different than his teammates out there. He's seen the game in a much different way. And sometimes it can become too pensive and not reactionary or not instinctful, right? Yeah. And I think that, and that's fine. I mean, that's what's made him successful, but he needs to be more in the moment, in the split second, and to really react faster. And I think, it will come right now, but I wonder too for him, Haggs, sometimes I notice too, and I don't think that's the issue right now. I think it's more of what you say, but I think another thing sometimes I've seen with Pasta is he tries to do too much, but I don't think that's the issue right now, but he needs to just find a happy balance and just go out there and play and not think as much if he can. So we'll see what happens with that. But, I think if one of those guys, Pasta or Marchand, starts to find their groove, obviously it rubs off on the rest of the guys. And maybe the issue is right now that some of their teammates are just waiting instead of acting themselves and taking the baton themselves. They're waiting for these guys to kick it into high gear.
Yeah, I will say also that line, Zach has had a lot of really good opportunities, and he just hasn't been able to finish. Like, he's been set up for a ton of great chances in the early going. He's played well, and he just has not been able to finish any of them. And it might look a little differently if he'd finished off some of those passes that Boston threw his way, or all that stuff. So, like, all right. Well, I'm going to play this into the final tweet here. Rebuild incoming without Bergeron or Chara. This team is lost, from Dgar _083. And like what I want to get, like what I wanted to say before I read that is, like, I have total faith watching in the early going here that they're going to be fine. Like, you know what I mean? I don't see any like real problems with this team. I think they're going to score enough to win games. I think Swayman looks good. I think their defense is going to be fine. Like, I think all of the problems they have are correctable, including the special teams, which has not been very good to start the year either. Yes, they're not going to be like a high-powered, like, we're going to score 4 goals a game offense. Like, you can see that. You can see they're a top 6 winger short right now, and that's going to cause some times where they're going to have some, like, offensive challenges. But I don't see anything like that says rebuild. I don't see anything that says this isn't a playoff team. I don't see anything that, like, Bruins fans need to be in the streets panicking. I just think there are some frustrating things about this team. And like last year, I don't think they played particularly great early in the season either, but they got wins pretty easily. Like, they were just getting wins sometimes when they didn't deserve to get wins last year. And they were able to build up a good record as a result of that. In the early going, that hasn't happened as much, but now they've played Florida. They played the best team in the NHL twice, and they're not going to play them again for a long time.
Yep.
So, like, is now when they start to, like, build up points and build up their record. And, like, I think they're going to be fine. I don't see anything on this, aside from the coaching thing, which I think will play itself out. I don't see anything on that's problematic or concerning about, like, anything going on with this team right now.
No, I mean,
overly concerned.
It's a good point. They are what we thought they'd be. They're just not.
Yeah.
They're not doing the things that cater to that they need to do to be successful with who they are. So I think it's a great point by you. But the only thing I would caution with them too, and I think they will do it, is you don't wait too long, because I think that the Atlantic Division, I said this the last time I was on with you, and I'll say it over and over again. I think the Atlantic Division is the toughest division in hockey right now. I think, you've got that mix of teams, the Ottawa, I know Buffalo does not look good right now, but Ottawa, Buffalo, Montreal, who am I forgetting there? That other team that hasn't made the playoffs in a while, Detroit. Yeah. One of those teams is going to get over the hump. Like, one of them eventually is getting over the hump, Joe, and I could easily see 5 teams from the Atlantic making the playoffs and 3 from the Met. So there's going to be a big mishmash there, a big, like, mess in the bottom of there, in terms of the 7th to 10th to 11th seeds in the Eastern Conference, where you don't want to be in that. You need to, at some point in the season, you need to figure it out and you get a little ahead of that, so you're not worrying about that and you're not freaking out at the end of the season. Oh my God, we might get bumped out here. But I don't think they're close to that right now. I really don't. I think it's a feeling out process. As I said, there's so many teams that were expected to be cup contenders right now. You look at Colorado's just starting to get going, and I know they had a lot of injuries, but teams like that, they don't have goaltending, I'll tell you that. But Nashville, that everyone was all over them. Look at the offseason they had. They need some defense, though.
What about Edmonton?
We can go on and on here. Yeah.
Total mess.
Yes, there's a lot of teams that are a mess. So I just think,
but a lot of those, unfortunately for the Bruins, a lot of those are out west.
It's patience. I'll tell you, Bruins fans won't want to hear it right now, though. But I think Toronto's finally figuring it out, Joe, in terms of balance.
Well, Berube might be the guy that finally brings it out of him.
Their goaltending's a lot better than people think. It's a lot better. I think Stolarz, it was one of the most underrated pickups of the offseason. He's a late bloomer, and he's really showing it right now.
He definitely. That was a great game last night. Like, I don't know what the hell Vasilevsky was thinking, giving the ice shower to Morgan Riley before the game, and then he ends up getting yanked like afterwards. Like, just complete
just buffoonery. Like for a great player to do something like that is just head scratching. Like, why do you do that?
This early in the season too. I was like,
I know.
all right, I get you trying to spark a rivalry here, but
yeah. Would that have happened if Stamkos was still the captain in Tampa? I'm not sure. Not sure if that would have happened with Stamkos as the captain or not. All right, Murph, thank you very much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Let's thank our sponsors real quick. Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's also take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Murph, thanks, buddy.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
All right, absolutely. Everybody else out there, thanks for listening. We'll see you at the ring.